interpreters. You'll also notice a QR code on the card which links to a short awareness video. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name or ask a question directly by a member before speaking. For those participating in video conference, I don't think we have anyone on video conference today. I'd also like to remind witnesses that committee members may ask questions in both French or English. And if you need interpretation, please take a moment now to prepare your earpiece and select the listening channel you need in advance in order to take full advantage of the time allotted for each question and answer. A reminder that all comments should go through the chair, and for members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hands. We don't have anyone on Zoom, so I will not give instructions there. Joining us today for the first 45 minutes, we have Atlantic Food Action Coalition, Justin Cadafio, Food First Newfoundland, Joshua Smee, or NL, I'm assuming, yes, okay, and Second Harvest Canada, Laurie Nickel, Chief Executive Officer. We'll first start with Joshua, please. You have 5 minutes.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Good morning, in fact. I'm still on Atlantic time, I think. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee about this important topic today, and thanks for taking it up. My name is Joshua Smee. I'm the CEO of Food First NL. We are a nonprofit organization with staff across both Newfoundland and Labrador. And at Food First NL, our vision is of a Newfoundland and Labrador where everyone can eat with joy and dignity. And that vision reminds us that food security isn't just about how many calories you eat. It's about where those calories come from, how you eat them, and who you eat them with. And so in these unstable times, every part of that picture is under pressure. Your committee has heard this repeatedly. You've had some great speakers in, including folks from our own province. And when our organization looks around at the state of our local food system in Newfoundland and Labrador, too often we see a landscape of missed opportunities. So we see an aging population of farmers at the same time as we see young people struggling to find a foothold in the food system. We see stores full of imported food that's been sitting on trucks and in warehouses for weeks, while local producers struggle to access local markets. We see the vast majority of our province's institutional buyers, so places like hospitals and schools, sending their food budgets out of province, not because they don't want to invest locally, but because they don't have a mechanism to do it. And so what could some solutions look like? We think that, at least in part, it looks like a thriving network of food hubs across the country. And we're really excited to hear the details of the announcement that's coming this afternoon, because I think that lines up pretty closely with some of what I'm going to say, and I think I can preview Justin's remarks a little bit here. We operate 2 nonprofit food hubs in Newfoundland and Labrador right now, one in Western Newfoundland and one in the Avalon Peninsula. And I'll tell you a little bit about how they work. We operate an online store that producers in each region sign up for. Each week, they post what they have. Then customers can make a single order that includes products from as many producers as they want. Food First goes out, we gather things in bulk from all the producers, we divide them into customer orders, and we ship those back to pickup points in people's own communities all over the province. So you go down to your local store to gas up your car, and there's a box waiting for you with your name on it, with products from 40 different farmers in it. So that's the kind of community-based solution we're seeing emerge all across the country. And to be clear, we did not invent this model. We are riding a wave that is spreading across Canada, and for very good reason. Food hubs provide huge benefits to both producers and purchasers. The biggest impact here is on small farmers and other small producers. Many of them can't gain access into grocery stores or can't afford to, and on new entrants, especially new Canadians entering the food system. These folks gain immediate access to an enthusiastic market with thousands of customers, dedicated promotional and marketing support. They have to spend less time off their farm or outside of their operation trying to sell and more time doing their work. And on the consumer side, people are able to access local food more reliably, particularly people who don't have access to a car or don't have a farmer's market nearby. MP Connors is here from Newfoundland Labrador. I think we know how it works. We have the highest percentage of farm gate sales in the country, but that's all well and good if you can drive from farm gate to farm gate, but lots of us can't. right? And so we also see restaurants and institutional buyers whose orders are too big for a single producer to meet, but they can use a food hub to aggregate products from multiple producers. And as an operator, we've seen a lot of success with this, but we've also seen the challenges these models face. For a food hub to stand on its own 2 feet financially, it needs time. It needs time to build up its market, to build up its customer base, and that is a hard thing for a nonprofit organization to come by. Our funding systems are overwhelmingly focused on supporting capital costs, when what a lot of these local initiatives actually need is operating dollars. They need some runway. We do, though, see some really great things coming. We see a powerful alignment emerging now with the National School Food Program. So a core principle of Canada's school food policy is that food be locally sourced where possible and reflective of local and regional circumstances. We've seen recent research showing a national school food program could contribute $4.8 billion to local economies through domestic food purchasing over the next 10 years and create hundreds of thousands of jobs in the food system. In our conversations with stakeholders across Newfoundland and Labrador, we have heard over and over that food hubs are going to play a critical role in making this happen. So what can government do is a question that always comes to mind here. We would hope to see a dedicated funding stream emerge that can make both capital and operating investments in this kind of infrastructure, multi-year investments that give these kind of infrastructure projects the runway they need to get off the ground and sustain themselves. We'd also really hope to see continued work to embed conversations about local procurement into the conversations between the federal government and the provincial governments as the next round of school food agreements are updated. It's really important to have the federal government play that role in setting targets and keeping the provinces ambitious about local procurement. Thank you very much.
Next, we'll go to Second Harvest.
Second Harvest, I'm the CEO. We are Canada's largest food rescue organization and a leading source of information on food waste. We tackle food waste at the systems level through research and surplus food redistribution and education and advocacy. And our research on food waste is Canada's best resource on where, why, and how much of our food that is produced for Canada is being lost or wasted across the supply chain. We also did some great research on charitable organizations, of which there are 61,000 across this country that are providing people with low or no-cost food. So we work with about 15,000 food businesses across every province and territory to rescue their good surplus food and distribute it to some of these charities. And we supported 6 million people last year with that great food that would have gone to waste. So we have a pretty unique perspective on food security, food waste, and the opportunities that exist within Canada's food system. And one of the key themes emerging from this wonderful committee's work on the study is that food security extends far beyond production. And we agree, while Canada produces an abundance of food, barriers related to affordability, access, distribution, and food loss and waste continue to prevent many people from getting the food they need. So addressing these challenges requires a systems-wide approach. And today I'll focus on 3 areas as you consider evidence for this study. First, Canada must unlock more value within its own food system by investing in domestic processing capacity and innovation. Across Canada, we continue to export raw materials while importing higher value processed foods. Meanwhile, industry leaders tell us parts of Canada's food processing and co-packing infrastructure are underused and causing edible food to go to waste. So to better understand these challenges, Second Harvest has launched a national research project on Canada's food processing and co-packing capacity. And the study will identify where infrastructure exists, where capacity gaps remain, where assets are underused, and what barriers prevent businesses from making full use of existing facilities. It will also examine trends in exporting raw commodities, importing finished products to identify opportunities to keep more value creation in Canada. Industry stakeholders involved in the project have already told us this is research that should have been undertaken years ago. The research is supported by an advisory committee that includes Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, national industry associations, major food processors, and Canada's largest retailers. It is rare to see this level of alignment across the food value chain, and it underscores the importance of addressing long-standing gaps in our understanding of Canada's food processing capacity. Second, I want to highlight how strengthening local production and processing will reduce food waste and our environmental impact. Our research shows that we waste 46.5% of all the food produced for Canada. Of that, $58 billion is unavoidable. It is avoidable, and it's perfectly edible. And the annual CO2 emissions from this avoidable food waste are equal to the emissions of 5.6 million cars every year. So buying locally can help reduce food waste by reducing the number of food miles traveled between farm and consumer, allowing food to arrive fresher and with a longer remaining shelf life. Shorter supply chains also reduce spoilage, damage, and quality deterioration during transportation, particularly for perishable foods. By keeping closer to where it's produced, a local food system helps ensure more food is eaten rather than wasted. Third, I will draw from Second Harvest experience supporting local purchasing initiatives and food recovery programs that kept Canadian food in Canada's communities. During the pandemic, the federal government Surplus Food Rescue Program provided emergency funding to purchase surplus food that lost its markets when restaurants, hotels, and institutions suddenly closed. Through that program, we purchased and redistributed more than 9.4 million pounds of surplus food across every province and territory. It supported Canadian producers and food businesses facing unprecedented disruption while ensuring good food reached communities instead of going to waste. Beyond food itself, the program helped build and strengthen a national network of community organization, distribution partners, and logistics infrastructure that continue to support food recovery efforts today. In 2022, as you all may remember, there was a market disruption that left millions of pounds of PEI potatoes without a destination. So we partnered with government, growers, and community organizations to purchase and redistribute 12 million pounds of those potatoes across Canada to everywhere, including rural and remote. And in 2024, when the closure of a major fruit cooperative left apples stranded in BC orchards, we worked with farmers and partners to purchase and distribute more than 154,000 pounds of apples. Initiatives like these provide a release valve after a supply chain disruption, supporting Canadian businesses to recover the value, increasing access to nutritious food, and keeping more Canadian-grown food within the domestic food system.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Atlantic Food Coalition, Action Coalition. You have 5 minutes.
Monsieur le Président et membres du comité, merci de m'avoir invité aujourd'hui.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you for inviting me today.
And I'm the Director of Policy with the Centre for Local Prosperity. I'm also a co-founder and current director with the Halifax Regional Food Hub, and I'm appearing today as director with the Atlantic Food Action Coalition, or AFAC. AFAC works across Atlantic Canada to strengthen food sovereignty and community-rooted food systems. Over the past several months, we've supported a listening project with over 150 farmers and food producers. I'll be drawing from those conversations today. Now, this study asks the right questions: how we strengthen food security amid global instability, create more value in Canada's food chain, support local production and processing, and support local purchasing. But answering these questions honestly means going beyond the usual language of growth, innovation, and productivity. Our clearest finding is that Canada doesn't have a food production problem. That is not the root of our food insecurity crisis. Our farmers know how to grow food. What we're losing are the systems that let communities feed themselves: the processing, storage, distribution, procurement, local ownership, and market pathways that move food from farms into homes, in communities, institutions, and beyond. Across Atlantic Canada, demand for local food is real. Consumers want it, institutions want to buy it, producers want to supply it, but the middle of the food system has been hollowed out. Producers tell us about lost processing facilities, lost abattoirs, limited cold storage, weak local distribution, difficult procurement pathways, increasing transportation costs. Many can grow food, but they can't profitably sell it into regional markets. We lost over 21% of our farms in 5 years in Nova Scotia. So if a region can't process, store, distribute, or purchase the food that it produces, it's not resilient by any measure. True resilience comes from diversity, redundancy, interconnection, and the ability to adapt. A system built on concentrated ownership, long supply chains, and just-in-time logistics may look efficient under stable conditions, but under stress, it breaks, and it's breaking. We also need to name corporate concentration directly. Canada has one of the most corporately concentrated grocery sectors in the entire world, and concentration continues to rise across processing, distribution inputs, and seed systems. So the issue isn't whether value is created in Canada. It's who captures that value, who owns the infrastructure, who sets the terms, and whether food system wealth circulates in communities or leaks out of them. This speaks directly to the gap between producers and consumers. Farmers are at the end of their margins. Labor, land, debt, fuel, feed, fertilizer, it goes on. That's all going to keep rising in cost. And many simply can't charge less and survive. At the same time, households are facing a brutal cost of living crisis. And Canada's grocery sector is continuing to profit. That gap won't be solved by telling producers to absorb more costs or telling consumers to pony up and pay more. It requires shorter supply chains, stronger local markets, and public policy that helps more value reach producers while increasing access for eaters. That's where community wealth building is helpful. It asks who owns these assets, who gets the contracts, where does public spending go? Does wealth stay rooted locally? GDP misses out on this. GDPs can rise while numbers of farms fall, while food insecurity climbs, and while public dollars keep getting siphoned out of the tax base. This is why local food isn't a cute thing. It's not just a consumer preference. It's not a branding exercise. It's pragmatism. It's food sovereignty, power, agency, land, governance, and control over our very food systems. So based on what we've heard in Atlantic Canada, we recommend 4 practical solutions. First, invest in the missing middle of regional food infrastructure. We gutted it. We can rebuild it. Second, use your public procurement dollars as an economic development tool. Institutions already pay for food. Public spending should be serving the public good, not chasing sticker prices. And regional procurement requires hard, actual purchasing minimums. Third, we need to strengthen fair price market pathways. That means supporting independent grocers, farmers markets, food hubs, cooperatives, regional distribution, all while addressing corporate concentration. Fourth, we need to really start measuring what matters. If we only count export growth, output, and GDP, guess what we keep missing? Farm profitability, succession, processing capacity, ownership diversity, economic leakage, food insecurity, local economic multiplier effects, the list goes on. What we're hearing loud and clear is that folks aren't asking for another short-term pilot project to solve this problem. People are asking for the infrastructure, funding, and policy conditions to rebuild food systems that are resilient, democratic, and rooted in place.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much. So we'll go to our first round for 6 minutes. So we'll go to the Conservatives first. Mr. Epp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of you for your testimony and also for the good work that your organizations do. I very recently, as in hours, came back from a conference that dealt more with global food systems, touching on many of the themes that you did as well. Caloric intake for the world, on average, 2,963 calories per person. North America, it's 3,500, down to 2,600 for Asia. Sorry, for Africa, Asia is about just under 3,000. Much of the world has room to grow. Obviously, they're also going to be focused on local systems. The speaker that I took a lot away from, if anyone's heard the book Food Fight from Richard Sexton, he gave an interesting presentation, which is going to sound a little counter to some of your testimony. He's saying 3 things. The world needs to eliminate yield-reducing policies, needs to stop discouraging innovation through regulations and legislation, and it needs to find the most efficient land and use the most efficient purposes. That's his approach, but that's coming at it more from a global-wide system. You're coming at it more from a local system. So the question I'm going to ask each of you, do you have an idea? North American average is 3,500 calories. What's the present caloric intake supplied locally? And by locally, let's say Atlantic Canada. Maybe Laurie, I'll start with you and we'll just go across.
What the answer to that is, but I would say I'm going to go back to the food waste. Like, our systems globally are broken. If we can waste this much food while people can't have food, that's a big problem. But calorically, I think it would vary depending on who you're looking at.
Just.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, there's already more than enough calories on the planet to feed the people.
Right.
And most food is actually grown by smallholders or small to medium scale farmers. Globally, there's 29% food insecurity. Where I live, it's about that percentage too. That's by design. That's a choice. And so I think the challenge really is to recalibrate the food system such that it's oven for the people and not oven for the profit takers.
In Newfoundland and Labrador, we don't have calorie data, but I can tell you a few things. We know that the vast majority of food that folks eat in our province is brought in from outside. We don't have an exact bead, but it's somewhere between 75 and 90%. But I think what we miss when we use that number is that we also have the highest rate of wild food access of any province. So everyone I know either fishes or hunts or knows someone who does. And a lot of people are producing their own food outside of the market economy, right? We're not counting food that's grown, if you've ever driven up the Northern Peninsula, Newfoundland, food that's grown in roadside gardens on the highway, stuff like that. So I think for most people in Atlantic Canada, it's true. We're always going to be in a global food system, and most of our calories are always going to come from outside of it. But I think we have to be careful not to let that swamp thinking about how to make the local food system stronger within the share that it is still making up.
I live in southwestern Ontario.
J'habite dans le sud-ouest de l'Ontario. Nous avons beaucoup d'aliments qui y poussent, mais je soupçonne que la plupart de mes aliments...
Because of the diversity which came up and to have that access. I'm going to get at now, and we all, I think, want to strengthen our local systems. I'm going to get to the missing middle, which I really like that language in a second. What's your recommendation? Because agriculture is a shared jurisdiction between the federal government and the provincial governments. How do we get at that? How do we get at encouraging the processing when it becomes a shared jurisdiction? Where does the responsibility lie? Joshua.
I think there's a couple of pieces. There are joint federal-provincial programs that are important players in the funding space. Things like CAP or Sustainable CAP, which is a vital support for farmers and producers with their costs, with equipment costs, things like that. I think we can, and there's a new policy framework being developed for SCAP right now. So I think it's important to think through some of the questions this committee is addressing in that policy framework development. The other role I think the feds can really play is as a target setter. So in agreements with the provinces, such as the school food agreements, the federal government has the opportunity to build in targets and look to the provinces to figure out ways to meet them, particularly for institutional procurement, which is a real driver of this.
I want to give either of you an opportunity to weigh in.
Yeah, the one thing I like to stress is just that food security is a matter of national security. So we need to find ways to take our coffers, which are considerably larger at the federal level, especially if you consider the size of the coffers of a small province like Nova Scotia, to incentivize public partnerships between provinces and the federal government. So I think we've got a big kitty we can draw from, and we'll see the provincial government happily join up or follow suit, but they can't do it on their own.
Ms. Dickley, you touched on the affordability aspect. How do we get at that? Is that affordability, the gap in affordability, coming from how our food systems are structured, or is it coming from our general economy, our general income? How do we get at that affordability?
I would argue that it's income. So to your first question, I would say federally you have a role to play in the harmonization of things across the provinces, because that's a big problem. Like when we can get a farmer's tax credit in 4 provinces and you can't get them across the board, that's a problem. But, poverty reduction is about income. People need money in their pockets to buy food, and so that is a very complex system. It is not just within the agriculture system. I would argue this agriculture system is broken, and I'm going to go back to this, when we can waste this much food while people are hungry. It's not going to solve hunger, but we can solve an environmental imperative while we work on policy for the economics of just your average person.
Let me sneak one more in, and you all touched on the missing middle. The processing capability, the value adding that we don't do a good enough job of. Again, where do we start addressing that, Laurie?
We start with the research, right? We need foundational research to say what's actually happening across this country so that we can make decisions and goals for that. So that's what we're starting with.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to the Liberals for 6 minutes. Who do I? Okay, sorry, Paul. Sorry, MP Connors, sorry.
Thank you very much, and welcome, guests. Welcome, Josh. I want to say the great work that you're doing, the Food First and L is doing in Newfoundland is remarkable, and to the other associations as well. Lots of great work. And the issue of food security in Newfoundland and Labrador is a little bit unique to other places because we are an island and we rely on Marine Atlantic in order to bring a lot of our fresh fruit and vegetables to the island. Josh, when you were speaking, your opening remarks, you talked about missed opportunities and demand for local food. Can you elaborate on some of those missed opportunities that you think we
Sure.
should?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think there are a lot of them. We've seen on the institutional buying side, for example, I was talking to a school food provider who spent a whole summer trying to figure out how to replace their imported carrot supply with local carrots, which, as you know, we don't grow a lot of things in our province, but we do grow plenty of those. But they couldn't make it work because that missing middle wasn't there. There was no one that they could buy from in the quantity that they need, who could ship in the quantities that they need, or who could process in the ways that they need to supply their school food program. And this is the kind of story we hear all the time, particularly from schools and from hospitals. When you think of who are the biggest buyers and who could make the most impact on the shape of the sector by doing things like forward contracting, if producers knew that there was a steady demand going forward, that gives them the security to expand their operations, right? But without that missing middle, it just isn't happening. Those connections are getting missed. People are sailing past each other, saying that they want to work together. We hear that, but we also hear that from individual households who would love to buy local but don't know how. And I think particularly if we talk to folks in larger communities, places like, say, St. John's or Corner Brook, there's lots of folks who don't have access to the countryside where the producers are located and are missing out. And we hear from them all the time. And it's those people who are driving the demand for the food hubs and other operations that already exist.
So we're talking about the missing middle, excuse me. In Newfoundland and Labrador, we talk a lot about storage facilities and the capability of farmers to work together or to have storage facilities. What's your experience with that from your food hub experience?
So storage facilities matter, and I think it's important to have more investment in shared storage. But I think what we're finding the bigger gaps right now are processing and distribution, right? So if you operate a small store on the Northern Peninsula of Newfoundland and you'd like to buy food from Cormac, which is a couple hours down the road, it's remarkably difficult to do that. Our distribution system is not set up to bring small quantities often from small producers to small retailers in small communities. That's the gap, and I think we feel that's what we're hearing about more often is transportation distribution more than shared storage per se.
So we also talk about farm gate sales in Newfoundland. A lot of farms rely, or that's their market, farm gate sales. And therefore, they don't have access to get into the larger retail operations. Can you see farms in Newfoundland and Labrador being successful through farm gate sales or through farm hubs?
Yeah, we've seen it happen. So I think the advantage of participating in things like food hubs is you get a team on your side, right? You get someone whose job it is to promote what you're doing, to take care of the logistics and to let you get back to work on your farm. Farm gate sales are important, but they're also uncertain. You're taking a risk. You're harvesting things that might not get sold, whereas things like food hubs allow people to pre-sell what they're going to harvest. So it brings efficiency into the system, and it lets people get back to their work. I think one of the crises that we face is a labor crisis in food production, right? And so if people are taking time out of their day to drive into town or to spend time out on their gate selling, that can be a real challenge. And so I think we've seen that producers are really enthusiastic, and especially the small ones who are looking for a way into the market, right? When you look at people who are in their 20s and 30s trying to get a foothold in food production, those folks really benefit from an instant access to a larger network of purchasers.
Thank you very much. You also mentioned in your opening remarks joy and dignity for people who food and related to food security. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what actually you think food security means to individuals?
That's a great question. So when you talk about defining food security, it's not just about calories, as I said. It's about access to sufficient, healthy, culturally appropriate foods for people, right? And when you think about what that looks like in reality, it's being able to share a meal with your family, with your friends, with your community. It's being able to participate. How much community life happens over food? How many stories could we all tell that involve food? It's that participation that matters, right? And so, that's why access is not enough. Dignity matters, joy matters, having that moment of celebration. That's often where local food fits in. We hear over and over, we have a lived and living experience advisory group. They're a group of folks who all have lived experience of food insecurity, and they talk a lot about local food because folks who've experienced food insecurity would like to be able to participate in that part of community life. And if your food access landscape is based on, going to food banks and meal programs, sometimes you miss out on that. And that's where the joy and dignity fits in, and why providing access to the same kinds of foods the rest of us have access to really matters.
Thank you. Once again, thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to the block for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am really enjoying this discussion and what's been said about food hubs. In my region of Abitibi-Témiscamingue, if you follow the Ottawa River north for 6 hours, that region is a bit like the Newfoundland of Quebec. There's mining, there's forestry, but the study which was carried out made me realize that there are shortages everywhere. It's almost impossible to make profitable every stage of the food supply chain. You talk about the will of the producers. The willingness is there, but what are the obstacles you are facing? And what I'm interested in this context, and perhaps the department and officials are listening, how can we use public resources to create collective infrastructures or hubs to make agriculture profitable in regions where normally it is not, and in places where there are villages and smaller communities who really want to produce their food locally?
Thank you for the question. It's a great question. I think there are a lot of challenges when it comes to particularly the early stages of building up local food distribution networks. It takes time to build up a network of producers to get to scale, right? There are moments at which these things become self-sustaining, but you have to get pretty big. And especially for nonprofit organizations, and I'm sure there are many people around this table who've been involved, we don't have the same access to capital. We can't take out a loan. We don't have access to business financing. So I think one of the ways that that government and public resources is most important is providing that kind of support to nonprofits that are providing the kind of infrastructure for private producers and buyers to meet. Right? And so for us, I think the critical point is that there are real limits if that support is only for capital equipment. I am very happy that I was able to get a grant to buy an electric van. It makes my program work. We wouldn't be able to afford to do it without it. But there also has to be someone to drive that van. And that is the hardest part of the work to resource, the human capital of people to do the work of picking up the food, of packing it, of moving it. In the nonprofit ecosystem, that's really challenging. And I think that's why that's the missing piece up to this point in some of the government support programs for this kind of infrastructure, is that they don't cover the kind of soft costs that let us have that runway to get to a point where it can sustain itself on earning its own revenue.
Je vais ajouter aussi l'enjeu de...
I'll also add the marketing aspect, which is sometimes almost impossible in regions like ours. My office was wondering how we can help transport people, perhaps by bus, but perhaps half the bus could have fridges and go to the different villages. And this way, fresh products and produce could be distributed to smaller towns, and this would improve everybody's ability to access these types of foods. As you said, accessibility is an issue. Another thing, the first study we carried out, and we'd be happy to share that with you, has to do with abattoirs, or in my region we have a lot of cattle, but we've lost our abattoirs or meat processing plants for the last 25 years for all kinds of reasons, because of prices. So producers will bring their cattle elsewhere. I'm thinking of collective infrastructure as well. Isn't it the government's responsibility to take risks? Because at the moment, risk sharing, and the provinces are also involved in this, there is a cap on how much can be invested, and insurance is also an issue. It's so complicated to build an abattoir or a meat processing plant with all the regulations. So How should government take on those risks? For me, the government should assume 100% of the risks. It's like a water treatment plant or another major piece of infrastructure which is necessary. So would that work in your case?
And I think you're right to name that we sometimes make these conversations about farming, and we drift into a conversation just about fruits and vegetables and crops, but local protein is a very important part of the mix. As an operator, that's one of the things that's in most demand, and one of the places where, thinking about the affordability crisis, I think like all of us in this room are feeling it when we walk into a grocery store, a corporate grocery store now, that the price of protein is extremely high, and accessing local is one of the ways where you see that impact for people, that they can reach a more affordable price point. I would say the most important, I don't have an answer on how the exact sort of place the federal government should sit in de-risking, other than I think that it is a very important project to gather people in community, in collectives, in cooperatives, or in other shared structures, so that these kind of facilities have community ownership and are governed by community and by more than one player in the ecosystem.
On parle justement du prix des aliments.
Talking about the price of food, if we have a mortgage, there are interest costs, but we want people to pay less for groceries. However, if there's a collective approach, perhaps the price can come down for consumers. Mr. Cantafio would like to add something.
One of the ways that you incentivize local affordability. What's that? Short answer?
Short answer, really short.
Minimum procurement minimums, so that you actually use your institutions as economic anchors or anchor institutions, is important, especially since many of these provincially and federally funded institutions are located remotely. So you create regional churn and you lower the cost of production.
Thank you. We have probably about 8 minutes before we stop and get ready for the next round. So we'll do 3, 3, and 1.5. So we'll go to Mr. Barlow for 3 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to get into it, and I only have 3 minutes. A number of you all mentioned the importance of I think, Ms. Nicola, you said foundational research and how important that is. But Justin, just because of your neck of the woods and your comments or discussions with farmers, we talk about how important research is, but the government is shutting down 7 critical research stations and experimental farms, including the Napan farm near Truro, Nova Scotia, and Amherst. That will also impact and very likely lead to the closure of the Maritime Beef Institute. So these 2 facilities have been operating for almost 100 years, developing forage and beef genetics that thrive in Atlantic Canada. Shutting down this type of research and these types of programs that have helped with that local food production, what kind of impact is that going to have in Atlantic Canada and food security?
Yeah, that's a great example of us relying on corporations to do the work that they cannot do well when they're driven predominantly by profit extraction and capital accumulation. So if we have surging rates of farmer loss and farmland loss, and we have decreasing food sovereignty, Newfoundland, Labrador, less than 10% of the foods from there, less than 15% of Nova Scotia's foods from Nova Scotia, less than 8% of the fruits and vegetables, just the vegetables in New Brunswick are from there. What you're doing is you're eroding your region's food sovereignty, and you're assuming that the very corporate entities that have been proven to be guilty of bread price fixing and other forms of profiteering are going to solve these problems. Food sovereignty means having place-based or community-rooted food infrastructure, and that includes research, and that's just required. It needs to be reflective of the place, and you need to have folks who've got that real wisdom, your farmers, involved.
Laura, I know you raised the foundational research too. Maybe your comments, not only here, I highlighted Napan, but these research farms are in every province in the country, almost right across the country, and definitely have an impact. We talked about cold storage, Lacombe. They're going to lose Canada's only biosecurity cold storage facility, meat grading research. What impact is this going to have on local food production?
Mr. Barlow, I'm not qualified to answer that question, full stop. I'm just looking at research from a national perspective on what's manufacturing happening. I think research is critical, but I don't know enough about those ones to really answer that well.
Josh, do you want to add anything to that?
I think I'm in the same boat as Laurie on this one. I don't know enough about the specific institutions to comment. Thanks.
30 seconds, I have one?
25 seconds.
25 seconds. Just on the interprovincial trade issue, C5 exempted food from, we talked about value added and processing. How important it is to reduce those interprovincial trade barriers so that will encourage that local processing and value added as well? Joshua, for you, Newfoundland, I'm sure that's an issue.
I think that absolutely matters. When we think about the kind of layers to our food system, there are layers of local, right? Local within your region, local within your province, local interprovincially. And so reducing those barriers, I think from most people's perspective in our province, it's better if we're eating Atlantic than if we're eating international, for example.
Thank you very much. The Liberals for 3 minutes, Mr. Kellaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's great to be on this committee. And coming from Cape Breton Island, it's great to hear two-thirds of you, and learning from you, Laurie, on the work that's being done across the country is really important. So a couple of things from the testimony I kind of want to highlight in the very short time that we have. I'm big on unpacking words. I come from the not-for-profit world, so when someone says operating, my ears perk up, because a lot of, in the not-for-profit world writ large, you're asked to do projects to obtain money to do it, which is fine, but it doesn't address the underlying challenges and opportunities. So you, and three of you mentioned this in a roundabout way, you directly, with respect to capital and operating. So I'm wondering if you can unpack those words in terms, I know what capital, I know what operating is, but I wonder if the three of you can unpack, like, within the capital, consistent themes under capital, and operating, consistent themes under operating.
Sure, I can start. I think part of this for us, for capital, there's a couple of pieces. One is processing equipment. So physical pieces of equipment to process food are really important parts of the mix for community-driven food hubs. Most of them are never going to sustain themselves just selling food to households, right? So access to the kind of equipment that can cut a carrot down to the size that a hospital needs to cook it in its steam cooker, for example. That's the one kind of capital that matters. The other capital is things like distribution. Vehicles is a big part of it. Most of this kind of work only works if you own your own fleet, right? On the operating side, though, I think the biggest part of it is, to your point, steady, reliable, multi-year operating funds that you can plan on. Because the biggest challenge of running a community organization is not knowing what your budget is going to be 12 months from now. And that's especially true when producers are planning their production based on your operation. So we worked really closely with the Cape Breton Food Hub to seed ours. They were our inspiration. And we talk to them all the time. They are amazing people. And we've learned a lot from them. And that's one of the things we've learned from them, is that predictability is part of the value proposition for producers.
Sorry, can I speak to that for just 1 second? So at Second Harvest, the school food program, they came to us because they need cut carrots. So we actually had to build out a micro-processing center so that they could have local cut carrots in the schools. Otherwise, they were getting processed food. Our truck used to cost us $135,000. Now it's $250,000. Our cost for third-party logistics across the country has skyrocketed. So, like, we're looking at a $2.5 million increase next year alone. So operating third-party, as we build into manufacturing, we have to hire like 12 to 15 people to make it go. So there's just cost after cost after cost after inflation after inflation. So we need your help, man.
Thank you, Laurie. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay, Mr. Lemire, we have enough time for 2 minutes. Yep.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cantafio, I'd like you to complete your previous response. Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
I just want to elaborate a little bit on the concept of community wealth building as a framework that I think could be very helpful for this idea of addressing food insecurity in the wake of global instability, all these increasing pressures. Scotland, a sovereign nation, just adopted community wealth building as a framework at the federal level just a number of weeks ago. They're using it to ensure something that a person from my neck of the woods, Joseph Howe, says, what is for the public good? Every time we stimulate the local economy, is it for the public good? We should double check. So community wealth building has 5 pillars. I won't name them all, but one of the pillars is progressive procurement. So making sure that you use your public tax dollars to do the public good. And so to Mr. Lemire's sort of question, we have these very isolated communities, many of which have provincially and or federally funded institutions with significant food purchasing budgets. So if you relocalize even 30%, which I think needs to be the bare minimum, you suddenly create the type of economic demand and churn necessary to incentivize the additional food infrastructure you might need. So if I'm a rural abattoir, I might not exist anymore, and you might need somebody to drive over with a truck. And that's, I've seen that in Quebec. But maybe if you have a couple of, maybe an army base, maybe you have a school, a jail, preferentially sourcing local, all of their beef, for example, suddenly you've maybe incentivized and made the economic case to mobilize that institution as an anchor institution to create that local food ecosystem that you need.
Bien, tout à fait. Puis c'est important que vous le mentionnez parce que
It's important that you mention this because the challenge is often to have consistent production in the regions, and especially in an institutional setting, because this can make the whole enterprise viable. However, we have to make sure that any debts are not downloaded onto consumers if the risks are shared between organizations and the government.
Of how the former premier of Nova Scotia? Okay. That's a good reference. Thank you very much to our witnesses. It was very informative, and we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. We will stop for 5 minutes while we transition to the next group. Thank you so much. the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18th, 2025. The committee is resuming its study on food security in the face of global instability. I'd like to welcome our witnesses, all of them who are online. From Greener Village, Alex Boyd. We have from Le Table de Chef, Jean-Francois Archambault. And from the Salvation Army, Luke Orrell and Karen Holft. Thank you so much for being here. You each have 5 minutes as organizations. And please, just as a reminder, please, if you do, have something to say, you can use the raise arm function. And we'll start with the Salvation Army for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and honorable members. On behalf of the Salvation Army, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to your study on food security in the face of global instability. As the largest non-government provider of social services in Canada, this is something we see every day in the 400 communities, urban, suburban, rural, remote, and northern, that we serve across our country from coast to coast to coast. The one thing that is similar in every jurisdiction, every unit across our nation, is food security issues. The food policy for Canada's vision is that all people in Canada are able to access a sufficient amount of safe, nutritious, and culturally diverse food. Food security is fundamentally about access, ensuring that the people living in Canada have reliable access to nutritious food. The access to food is what we would like to speak to today. Individuals and families are turning to community food hubs when food insecurity means that there's not enough food at home for their dinner. The Salvation Army has been working to strengthen food security and to improve support for the people we serve across our country. The people we serve who are on limited incomes, seniors, single income families, minimum wage earners, those on income assistance programs. They face barriers to accessing local food. They're usually limited to the cheapest mass-produced food sourced from distant locations. Food security requires support to ensure access to locally produced food. As this committee has heard previously, food affordability and access are closely tied to the people and the labor that support every stage of that system. Community organizations continue to face the same rising costs for food, labor, and operations as other sectors. And so food distributed through the charitable and not-for-profit sector requires significant supports beyond the food itself. Those include staffing, program space, transportation, storage, and essential supplies, the elements that are necessary to ensure safe and dignified service delivery and contribute meaningfully to the overall cost of food programming. During the COVID-19 pandemic, when global supply chains fractured and many more people in our community than usual faced food insecurity in the face of global instability, the federal government recognized this. Through the Emergency Food Security Fund, the government stepped up with direct funding for frontline community networks, of which we as the Salvation Army were one. This model proved that predictable federal investments allow local organizations to stabilize procurement, absorb market shocks, and safely bridge the gap between Canadian producers and vulnerable households. Now, in the face of ongoing global instability and inflation, that baseline support is more urgent than ever. As household budgets tighten, community needs are trending up at the exact moment that donations are dipping. We cannot build a resilient, sovereign food system on unpredictable, reactive charity alone. In our pre-budget submission, we called for the establishment of a permanent, stable, $300 million federal food security fund. This fund would represent a substantial step forward in supporting local community food procurement. It would give community hubs the financial predictability and stability to invest directly in the Canadian food chain. With permanent funding, the ability to scale innovative local initiatives that empower low-income families, seniors, and remote communities to directly purchase fresh, locally grown food becomes a possibility. With the upcoming National Food Security Strategy, I look forward to discussing how we together can strengthen food security and ensure access to local food production for all people living in Canada through a strong and effective food policy. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate you being a witness here today. And next we'll go to Greener Village.
Through the chair, I want to start by expressing my appreciation for the opportunity to speak with you about the state of the work we are doing and how the instability we see globally impacts food security locally. My name is Alex Boyd. I'm the CEO of Greener Village in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Greener Village has been serving people living with food insecurity in Fredericton for over 40 years. We have witnessed over the course of the last 40 years an ever-expanding group of people in our community that are facing food insecurity and the inevitable hunger that comes when people have insufficient access to food. And this hunger that food banks seek to satiate is damaging. It impacts our longevity, limits our potential, compromises our security, and erodes our community cohesion. We have witnessed firsthand in just the last few years the deep impact that global factors like pandemics, hyperinflation, and war have on food insecurity factors at home. In the past 5 years alone, the number of people that Greener Village is serving has increased by 135%, largely, if not overwhelmingly, driven by global factors. So it seems very clear from the lived experiences of agencies just like Greener Village who are working directly with food insecure people that we can't understate how difficult things become when we see global instability. And this instability around the globe continues to impact most the people who can influence it the least. It's why as a country we need to take a much more local approach to our food chain. But local can be extremely difficult for people, especially for people facing food insecurity and organizations like Greener Village that serve them. Local food is often in less processed forms, which is great for quality and health, but more difficult for longevity and efficiency. Individuals and agencies both are often limited by access to cold storage to keep foods at their appropriate holding temperature for food safety and quality. Food banks have especially struggled as they seek to meet an ever-increasing demand coupled with significant increases to the cost of each item provided to client families. When you couple the challenges mentioned above with the uncertain resources to access when needed, both individuals and agencies supporting themselves find themselves facing a very challenging question. Do I take the risk on local or play it safe with the convenience of shelf-stable, heavily processed foods? But despite the convenience we all know there are challenges involved with food that is grown on one continent, then shipped, processed, or even sold on another continent, not the least of which is the cost, both fiscal and environmental, of the fuel and infrastructure needed to ensure these supply chains continue to work. We need to look towards investing in local infrastructure projects that make access to local food easier to handle and that creates more meaningful connection to our existing agriculture. By creating these connection points, we will give our agricultural sector a much-needed boost in customer base. Unfortunately, food banks are not often seen as prime partners for local agriculture, and we continue to face infrastructural barriers to be able to use fresh food products that may become available, especially at large scale. Because of challenges within infrastructure, many food banks rely on heavily processed, shelf-stable products that are not typically from local sources and may not even be the most healthy. While these barriers remain true, there's also significant opportunity for local agriculture in partnership with food banks. In Food Banks Canada's 2025 Hunger Count report, they noted a staggering 2.165 million visits to food bank each month. These visits reflect a massive volume of food that is being procured through food donations or with donated funds to food banks. What could and would our system look like if all the donated funds that are purchasing foods could be worked into the local agriculture system? Even if $25 of local products could be secured per visit, that would equate to over $50 million in spending every month. Instead of funds being used to ship product around the world in heavily processed formats, we would invest in Canadian distribution of products that can be processed locally for families in need. That's why Greener Village is nearing completion of a construction project to build our Thrive Perishable Food Rescue Center. This new facility purpose is very simple: save viable fresh food from waste and invest in locally grown products. The center will be able to receive and process fresh produce into freezer-stable product that will be distributed to food banks all throughout New Brunswick. Greener Village and its partners, Feed MB and Food Banks Canada, are already creating partnerships with local producers to create healthy local food that can be processed and distributed. This means higher quality foods for the people I mentioned above, improving health and providing better nutrition so people can perform better in work or school. Our Thrive Perishable Food Rescue Center is already a successful pilot to reimagine how food banks can reduce food waste and process local agricultural products for those most in need. Other jurisdictions are already deep in the planning stages for more food rescue centers across the country. Innovation like this is why any future food security strategy must include the food banking network as a partner. Creating infrastructure for meaningful connection to our local agriculture should remain an important priority and method by which we can limit the instability we see globally and create a more food secure country.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony today. Next, we'll go to Le Table du Chef. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much for the invitation. First, to speak to who we are, La Table du Chef both feeds and educates. Feeding. We have a program for recovery of excess food in the restaurant, hotel, and institution sector. We distribute we have collected 3.3 portions of food apart from what food banks supply. We have over 450 establishments which are part of our program, including sports arenas and major events centers. Our organization also has a school food program, provides soups. Solidarity Suits, if you will, is the name of the program, which serves lunches in over 90 grade schools in several areas in Quebec, and we have a pilot project in Niagara Falls and Winnipeg. We are located in 375 public high schools, 300 in Quebec, and over 75 in 8 other Canadian provinces in both English and French, with the culinary brigades or the kitchen brigades program. And we are also in over 80 child protection systems throughout Quebec, and we also distribute over 6,000 kits to help students learn cooking skills for kids who are in the juvenile justice system. Many of them are young Indigenous people, so we teach them basic cooking skills. During the pandemic, we mobilized over...
For a second, can you just please lower your microphone? The interpreters are hearing some feedback. Just take the microphone in front of you on the arm and just lower it so it's a little bit more aligned here. Yeah, the arm.
Okay, sorry. Like this?
Yeah, I think that we'll try that. Sorry to interrupt you,
sorry.
but please proceed.
No worries. No worries. Thank you.
So our organization...
The chefs community, the culinary community, and in the pandemic, we prepared 4.4 million meals through the Canada and involving chefs, and getting 15,000 tons of food that was sent to prepare meals across the country and distributed throughout 18 months of the pandemic. I want to outline a couple of things that are crucial in terms of our food recovery program. Right now, we have the ambition, and we think that 3 million meals is just the tip point of the iceberg. We think we could probably get 5, 6, 7 times that quantity of food if we continue to mobilize the hospitality sector. And I think there's a misconception by some of the inspection agencies across the country, and there would need to be some more flexibility on that aspect in terms of looking at the work we've been doing in Quebec in mobilizing the hospitality sector and allowing for prepared food that are handled by chefs to be recovered and distributed to frontline agencies that are struggling to source food. The other aspect is a couple of weeks ago, Premier Starmer launch a national program to triple the amount of food that is distributed, surplus food that is collected through the fight against food waste in the UK, bringing all community organizations together. You've heard Laurie Nicol. We work hand in hand with Second Harvest and many of the food banks in this country and Salvation Army and many other partners. You have the ecosystem that is present on the social side of things. I think now we have to get this ambition, and it needs to start by not just looking at the business sector or the corporate sector or the public sector for these big national projects that Premier Carney has launched, but food security be one of that project. And you do have that infrastructure with us in place to work together hand in hand to get that ambition. And in Canada, triple the amount of food that is recovered and distributed to frontline agencies across this country. We can do 5-6 times just ourselves in the mobilizing Destination Canada and sustainable tourism and getting all the hotels on board and the convention space and continue to work hand in hand with the community frontline organization. On food education, I think it is crucial that the National School Food Program bring in food literacy. I know it's built into the program, but when you negotiate with the provinces, it is important to be clear with the provinces that it's not just food distribution, but food literacy is a big part of getting someone to learn how to cook and contribute.
I will stop you there. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you, and thank you for your patience during that slight delay. We'll go to the Conservatives now for 6 minutes. Mr. Gord.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ma question va...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Archambault. You were cut off, so I would like to know what your vision is. Can you please finish what you were telling us? Everything is in place for all actors to leverage their impact. We have to send a message to operators and to big organizations like hotel associations. If there's no intent on the part of our public leadership and institutions, well, commitment will not be taken seriously, and people will still be acting in silos. Today, we have all NHL arenas on board, and we've received an award. We fed 50,000 meals during the Grand Prix in Montreal or in the course of one weekend only. There's so many places where food is wasted. And if we don't send a clear message to event promoters to come on board, and if we don't have this national vision and ambition to reduce food waste, if we don't call on all organizations to come on board, what are we waiting for? We cannot wait anymore. It's 25 cents for us to bring food to a first-line organization, such as an organization to feed the homeless. Mr. Archambault, it always seems that you're running against the clock. It's a very complicated and difficult sector. Do you think that we need more freezer capacity? Tell us what your concrete needs on the ground are. You talk about big events. Absolutely. Promoters help us, but there's not enough help to implement freezing logistics. Think of FIFA. We are moving a fridge, and the Salvation Army is going to recover excess food from FIFA events in Toronto. So we're trying to move a fridge onto the site of the event, but we're told there's no room anymore to collect this excess food when we could collect 20,000 portions of food over 2 weeks of the FIFA. If that is not a priority, even though our message are clear, there has to be an obligation on event organizers to reduce food waste. This will also have an environmental and a social impact. It's really essential to make this a priority, to send out a clear message, and all of our partners are willing to act. despite all your efforts, what is missing in terms of infrastructure for you to do your job? Well, for us, it's events. We need to get the equipment on site. We have an agreement, though, with Marriott Hotels and other hotel chains, and we're implementing the program with them. They already have the infrastructure, these hotels. All we have to do is coach them, show them how it's done. All we have to do is give them the bags and containers, pots for anything that's liquid, and teach them about food handling and safety. They already have their kitchens and trained staff, so hotels have everything. We just have to get the message out to them. A hotel owner does not make food recovery a priority. And sometimes we email for 6 months with a hotel when we already have over 300 hotels on board working with us. We need an accelerator. We need to send out a clear message, and after that, we can come in and do our job. I had a talk with Beth McMahon the other day from a huge association in Canada about food recovery, Destination Canada with Lisa Frula. All the players are there, but all we have to do is have a national ambition that includes the retail and agriculture sectors with people like Laurie Nickel and Food Banks Canada. We also need to bring in the hotel and restaurant sectors to work with us and other organizations working at food recovery. Is there enough offer? Because it seems that demand is endless. Do you think that it is possible to cover the demand at any point? Well, we can work for the next 10 years to recover 15 to 20 million portions. Even then, work will still need to be done. But by then, all the major players will be on board. I think we can hit 3 million portions per year if all the major players are on board, and that way we can help distribute cheap meals to frontline organizations, which right now have to turn towards the business sector and to organize fundraising events, but that's not viable in the long term. Well, congratulations to you and to your teams. Honestly, it is a noble work to feed hungry people.
Liberals for 6 minutes, MP Dandurand.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today to speak about this very important subject. And in fact, from the start of the study, we've been presented with solutions and ideas, and which should be extended to all of Canada. So again, thank you for all your work, and thank you for your commitment to feeding people. Really, it is an essential mission. It is really the basic approach to all things. And when we include Canadian products, that's even better. We have to get Canadians to eat Canadian food, and your mission for each of you is exceptional. Mr. Archambault, it's nice to see you again. We saw each other a short while ago at an agricultural fair. Your mission is very important, and how your business grew is an inspiration. Now, in your everyday operations, in feeding vulnerable people and supporting young people and teaching them how to cook, what are the main, and I'll say this in English, where are the main gaps or shortfalls where the federal government can step in and not do the job of organizations like yours, but where can the government support you and organizations like yours? Thank you very much. Well, first, the easy things. I talked about the ambition to reduce food waste in Canada. I think my colleagues would agree with that. This is a message that has to be sent out, and if a committee is set up, we will come on board. The other thing is to reopen the Local Infrastructure Food Fund. I believe Mr. Carney has committed to refinancing community kitchens and local infrastructure, be it mobile units or in buildings. I've gone through around Canada and I've met with several community organizations which need more equipment, and people don't have the money to renovate their kitchens. I would also call on government to play a leadership role in kitchen equipment manufacturers. They also have to do their part. We shouldn't have to pay a full price for kitchen equipment which go to communities as opposed to commercial distributors. We could save 40 to 50% on the installation of this equipment. It wouldn't cost anything. We could install kitchen equipment. This money could come out of a Canadian fund to help all of these community kitchens to renovate their kitchens. It's extremely expensive and they don't have the money. And with Restaurants Canada, we've started those conversations. I think it's time for action and the federal government can help us. And the federal government should tell kitchen equipment manufacturers that they should also help local kitchens to rebuild their facilities because often they are just hanging together with duct tape and thread. This is the first time I hear you. This is not the first time I hear you speak about kitchen equipment manufacturers. I find that very interesting. So how can Restaurants Canada help you in that regard? Well, if we can actually get a message across to these equipment manufacturers, in other words, if this fund is set up and a local community applies to the fund, well, the equipment manufacturers will have, who are on board, will have contributed equipment at 50% the commercial rate. There was one such case in Calgary, actually, and a local community was able to replace 2/3 of its kitchen equipment. So I think these manufacturers can play a leadership role, and I think that this would create a trigger effect. I really care about this issue. Also, when we renegotiate the school food program, some schools already teach food literacy. There are a lot of small initiatives in grade schools, but there's a lack of money. In Quebec, for instance, right now, has spent 100% of money from a fund on the food, but there's no money for food literacy. I think the federal government should participate in this because food literacy programs in Quebec are having a really, really hard time, and I'm sure it's the case elsewhere in Canada. So I think those are three solutions which are fairly easy to implement. Thank you. Can you also talk about food in the summer, food programs in the summer once school is over? I think you have a partnership with a large grocery store or grocery chain. They're often attacked, but how is this grocery chain or store, which is working with you, helping to feed kids? Well, food banks, Moisson Montréal, for instance, have all kinds of programs, but Chantal Rouleau approached us in Quebec. It's not easy. There is a gap when it comes to feeding kids in the summertime. We give cooking classes, and there are summer camps for cooking as well.
To the block for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur Archambault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Archambault. I'd like to follow up on my two colleagues to focus on the initiatives of your organization. One of these initiatives is the Kitchen Brigade. A few years ago, one of my employees participated, Mishka Pichette. She was chef for a day at a restaurant, and it was an amazing experience for her. And there was a report on it by Radio-Canada. That initiative, does it still exist? At the time, were you involved in that high school in Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Do you know if the program still exists there? And do you know if that program still exists in Quebec's different regions? Well, actually, in 2006, schools in the 4 poorest districts in Montreal, the program was in 4 schools only. Now we're in 300 schools. And the Quebec Department of Agriculture and Fisheries funds 50% of those programs. We'd like to spread it across Canada. Outside of Quebec, we are in 75 high schools. And again, the program is offered in both official languages. And last weekend, there was a competition, the final, at the Quebec Institute for the hotel sector, and Gordon Bell School won the competition for the 2nd consecutive years, and it's one of the poorest schools in Canada. And the 2 teachers from that school showed that if this Winnipeg school could win, well, it had a huge effect on all the parents of the kids from those classes. And my Winnipeg people told me how amazing the program was. The Salvation RV was on board. Second Harvest was on board. All of that was amazing, but it's still not enough. Canadians across the country have to wake up and pull their heads out of the sand. If there's no money, we have to find creative solutions, and the federal government has to be on board to help us find new solutions. We're not there to simply get a subsidy or money. We need help. We need leverage. And everything has to be done transparently. And Canadians have to really understand what's happening on the ground. The situation is really bad on the ground. We are struggling, all levels of government, the business sector, the philanthropic sector. Everybody has to come on board to fix this problem. Well, you're an outstanding model of creativity, so thank you for that. When you talk about big events like the FIFA or the Formula One, those take place in big cities. What about help for smaller communities that don't host these big events? And in those areas, people eat a lot of poutine and pizzas rather than fresh fruits and vegetables. So how can we help smaller communities? 47% of the food we recover comes from food services, and 40% from the healthcare service. So from retirement homes, institutions, public food service institutions, they all have food recovery programs throughout Quebec and throughout Canada. As I said, this is only the tip of the iceberg. We're starting to work with CHEO in Ottawa. We're working with hospitals in Ontario. The hospital sector, for instance, and public food services sectors really have to ramp up their efforts to pass the food on to smaller communities. I'm privileged to be speaking, and I really appreciate your questions, but I don't want to take up all of your time because I have a few other colleagues here who might also want to answer your questions. Well, thank you. My next question is for Mr. Boyd. You talked about obstacles to food donations. Quebec has worked with farmers to donate food to food banks, and there's a tax credit. Can you tell us whether this tax credit has made a difference, and should it be extended federally?
Through the chair. Yes, I believe that tax credit has made a deep impact. Unfortunately, in New Brunswick, we aren't one of the provinces that has that tax credit. So we certainly look at Quebec as with a bit of envy in that respect, because we believe that will be a good tax credit that would encourage more donations in our agency in New Brunswick. And we also think that there is an appetite and there is a value to having that as a federal tax program as well. If you can connect farmers with a way to move excess product, but also be able to see some benefit from that beyond just the social good, that's clearly something that would be helpful for organizations like ours that are trying to increase the volume of fresh food and fresh frozen food that we provide to our client families. And so if we have the better access to that from local producers that we can process in facilities like our Food Rescue Center into frozen product as well, then it really increases the value of the food that we're able to provide to people in need.
Donc, mais souvent, est-ce que le crédit...
The tax credit for producers, is that the right solution? Often producers find it hard to turn a profit. So do you feel there are other ways to help producers be more generous with their excess products?
Short answer.
Excuse moi.
Yes, ideally, if there's resources within the network to be able to invest in locally produced agricultural products, like I mentioned in my opening statement, that is probably the number one way to help farmers is to actually be able to purchase product from them directly, as opposed to just rely on a credit.
Thank you.
Merci.
Next, we'll do the final round. We'll do 4, 4, and 2. So we'll start with Mr. Bragdon for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Much appreciated. And thank you to our guests and those witnesses who are here today and the important work that each of you are doing in your organizations. I can say that from any observation and experience I've had with, obviously, the Salvation Army and the incredible work that they do across the country and around the world to our most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable among us is to be commended. And first off, let me say on behalf of a grateful nation, thank you for your incredible work in that space, as well as I've had the privilege of meeting Mr. Boyd on several occasions from Fredericton and the great work that they're doing at Greener Village and some wonderful innovations and proposals you're putting forward, and I know already in that space. So thank you, and I'll be directing a lot of my questions to both of you, both your organizations. So first off, starting with the Salvation Army, your organization works directly with many Canadians who are facing food insecurity head on. I would like for you to just, and then I'll go to the Greener Village as well. Can you tell us what kind of increase in the demand for your services you are seeing in the last year, say even year over year, or even in the last 4 or 5 years, but definitely in the last year over year, because I know the food banks in my area, they're certainly seeing an increase in demand. I just wondered if you could speak to that from your perspective. So starting with you at the Salvation Army.
Sure. Thank you for the question. As we look at, I've been a Salvation Army officer 39 years, served many places across our country, and food insecurity right now at our food lines is trending to new groups that are coming to see us. Oftentimes, they are people who have been our donors who are now coming to us for help with food. As costs go up for rent, for housing, for transportation, for all the different costs, food is the one that gets squeezed out and then can be provided by others, or sort of trying to match how we get into that. The others are pretty staple costs, so you can't change them. And so I think we're seeing that shift all across our country. The donations where I come back are not enough to meet the demand. What we saw during COVID-19 was where the groups of people who usually don't or who are usually not food insecure showed us that the federal government can play a part in food security across our nation. In the last 4 years, they never really have. And so I guess we're asking for innovative new ideas that will change the face of our country. Many of the presenters have spoken to some of those. We would love to participate in that to see the people served.
Thank you. And to you, Mr. Boyd.
Yes, thank you for the question. Through the chair, yeah, we've seen about 135% increase in the number of people we're serving in the last 5 years. So that's double and some since we look at the stats from 2021. What we're seeing at that same time is a significant increase in certain demographics. For instance, the number of people who are accessing our food bank who are full-time employed, that percentage has more than doubled in the last 5 years. The number of newcomers more than doubled in the last 5 years. The number of students more than quadrupled in the last 5 years. So we're seeing certain demographics that we're seeing a lot more people of, and that's driving the growth in demand for food banks like ours.
Do you see the increased taxation and regulatory burdens that are on not only our farmers and producers, but also the increased tax burden and cost of living playing a significant role in this increase in demands for your services? Mr. Boyd, very quickly, and also over to the Salvation Army. If not, you can submit it in writing if you don't have time.
He's run out of time.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I think he caught on to it last minute, last second. Thank you. We'll go to the Liberals for 4 minutes. Mr. Fergus.
Merci beaucoup à tous les témoins qui sont.
Thank you very much to all of our witnesses. I've really appreciated your testimony. And the previous panel talked about how important it was that the federal government take part in more initiatives. I have a question for each of you. On the previous, or rather with the previous panel, we were talking about the missing middle in this. And one of the questions I had asked, but in private, was the role between wholesalers and retailers in the agri-food sector. Do you think that it would be advantageous to prevent the vertical integration which now exists between wholesalers and retailers in the grocery sector? I'll begin with you, Mr. Archambault. Thank you for the question. I've had talks about that. And when I look at wholesalers, well, they sometimes have to there's a certain operational relationship with retailers. Take fruits and vegetables. They have to guarantee that fruits and vegetables will have to be sold within 15 days so they are as fresh as possible to the consumer. And sometimes retailers will refuse that condition, and then a wholesaler will be stuck with 15 pallets of broccolis, which retailers won't take, but will go to the food banks, although that's not always possible. When it comes to frozen products, I've spoken with the head of Congé Bec, which has huge freezing facilities. And sometimes retailers refuse to take pre-frozen or products that are already frozen and don't meet with their conditions be given to food banks. That should be prohibited. There has to be a process to guarantee that any food product which is edible and accessible and which will not be sold go directly to a food distribution organization. And Nicolas and I had a very good conversation, so from Cogebec, but it's not necessarily the case with every freezing facility operator. I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of time, so I'd like to share my time with my colleague from Nova Scotia.
Thank you very much to all of our witnesses and to my colleague for the time. I just really have one question for Mr. Boyd, but thank you all for the work that you do in your communities. It's really profoundly important. And one of the things that we often hear from charitable groups and nonprofits is, we heard it in the last hour, is the difficulty of scaling and taking your operation to the next level in terms of impact and scale. So Mr. Boyd, if you could pinpoint in your mind, what would be the one or two things that the federal government could do, either on its own or in partnership with the provinces and others, to help organizations like yours scale to address the issue of food insecurity?
Thank you for that question. Through the chair, I think that if I was to pick one or two things briefly, it would be to focus on the right infrastructure that can benefit beyond. Like with most infrastructure projects, we build the infrastructure for a given need, but once we've built the infrastructure, it can be used for things that maybe weren't the original need. For instance, you build a road to a new community, and then that road can be used for a whole host of different avenues.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stop you there. I do have limited time today, so I'm going to go to the block for 2 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Boyd, I'd like to hear you speak to the challenges related to concentration in Canada's supermarket industry. They've developed some initiatives, such as discount grocers. How does that make it harder to make food available to people who really need it?
Through the chair, yeah, I think that it's important for the grocery sector to do that. It's part of their business model to not be giving away food when they can sell food. That's what they exist for. It can have an impact, obviously, when organizations like Greener Village or others are reliant on that food to give to people. So what we need to do is broaden the people we're working with and not be reliant on one particular demographic. And part of that is partnering with producers and wholesalers as well, so that it's not just reliant on the end user. Everyone's going to be working towards efficiency, and we certainly would encourage that because we don't want to have food waste at all. But if we can create the right infrastructure to be able to gather food at every point in the food chain, then we're less susceptible to the risk of discount food being significantly less than it was in previous times.
Mais justement, le fait qu'il y ait des initiatives.
Well, the fact that there are initiatives like Food Hero or Liquidation Marie, well, that means food will be sold at a very low cost and it would not go to food banks. So it would have an effect on stocks. So how can we, in that context, help people who need food the most?
Short answer.
That's a hard question to answer short. The reality is we're going to have to keep looking at alternate sources for food beyond just the reclaimed food that is at the end of its life to be able to get it to people who need it.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank our witnesses for being here today and for the very meaningful work you do to help Canadians. Thank you so much for your time. And we'll now suspend for 5 minutes to go into camera. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.